Welcome and enjoy your magical marketing insights. Hey there, I'm Christine Collins, and I wanted to give you today some very easy strategies that I use in my marketing process to simplify it and to help manage sometimes the very vast quantity of fun ideas and cool things I want to do in my business, as well as all of the things that I have to do and my marketing process. This allows me to feel like I'm in control of everything and that I don't start to feel overwhelmed. And so hopefully you'll find it helpful for you as well. So the basic premise lying underneath this strategy is considered to be sprint planning. And there is an entire methodology behind it. But for our purposes today, I'm going to kind of extract the key elements and then convert it into usage for an entrepreneur who's doing marketing work. So the very first step is to kind of pour everything out of your head, all of those things that are floating around in your mind, everything from client work that you may be doing to writing your next blog to putting on your next webinar, and all of the pieces and elements that may go into each of those things. Take all of that and put it down onto a page. And do it in no particular order. It's kind of like a brain dump. Just kind of get everything out that's floating around in your mind that you have to do, want to do, would like to do, perhaps one day aspire to do, but it isn't feasible for you to do it right now, but it's still kind of tickling the back of your mind and filling up energy and filling up space in your mind. So take all of that, put it onto a piece of paper, write everything down. You can number it if you want to, but you don't have to. And actually, I recommend that you don't number it because then you might start to feel like you're trying to organize it already into priorities. And right now, the purpose is simply to just get it all out. So put all of it down on a big sheet. Once you have it all down on that sheet, have a look at everything that's there and slowly begin to identify which things feel like they are the most urgent priority. For example, if you already have a webinar planned and it's happening this month or next month, the elements that correspond with that webinar are probably more urgent than that toy box project that you have that maybe could wait another month or two. So we're going to just star the things that seem like they are the most urgent and the things that we think we want to include in what we're going to call the next sprint. And that is usually a 2-week period. Now you can adjust this to accommodate your work style. I like to do it for the whole upcoming month and then break it further down into weekly tasks. But it's a little bit easier if you kind of adjust it to how you like to work. Traditionally, it is a 2-week period. So once you've identified what is going to be included in your next upcoming sprint by putting a star next to those items, you get to decide how many of those items are to be included in that sprint. But the best way to ensure that you don't get yourself overwhelmed and spread yourself too thin or have more in that sprint than what you can actually accommodate with your own bandwidth is to weight the items and then decide for your 2-week period or whatever your sprint period is, what is the maximum weight that you want to have in that time frame. So there are different ways that you can do this. People sometimes will use numbers, so they'll say, this particular task or item is weighted at a 2, or this particular task or item is weighted at a 6. And that number that you're weighting it as does not correspond to anything in particular. It doesn't correspond to like number of minutes or anything like that, because sometimes things take more time or less time than we actually expect them to. And so it's really more like, how heavy does the item feel? How big does it feel? How much bandwidth will it take? And that includes everything from time, actual time, but also you want to incorporate things like your energy. So for example, if getting onto a live stream or producing and delivering a webinar takes a lot more energy from you than writing 5 blogs does, then you want to incorporate that understanding into how you weight that item. So if that is a very draining task or a very draining activity for you, weight that item heavily enough that perhaps that's the only item in your sprint. It may just be that producing and delivering and recording and getting out the emails and all of the components that are involved in that, maybe that's the only thing that's going to be produced in that 2-week period or in that sprint period. So essentially you are assigning weights to each of the items that you have starred, that you have identified as being very important for you to accomplish in that 2-week or whatever it is in that 2-week period. So you've identified your maximum amount of weight that 2 weeks can accommodate. You have weighted the individual tasks that have been starred and prioritized. So now you know which items can actually be included. So if you're going to use weight, for example, and you say, okay, 20 pounds per sprint, it's going to cost me about 10 pounds to actually deliver the webinar and about 5 pounds to put together the email sequences, etc., and another 5 pounds will go into the promotion of this. Okay, I've hit my max of my 20 pounds. So those are the only items that go into that next sprint. At a different time though, you may have a sprint that includes like 15 tasks. It may be you're going to quickly do this and quickly do that, and there's a lot of smaller items because each of those smaller items is only 1 pound, 2 pounds, and so to get to your 20 pounds you can actually fit quite a bit more in. And do make sure when you're deciding on your total poundage or your total weight for that period of time that you have already identified things like eating and fun activities and leisure activities and mindset activities and all of your normal routines that are really important for you in order to be successful in accomplishing your goals. So make sure you take that into account as well. We don't necessarily list those things into the sprint, but you do want to make sure that in your energy budget, you have already accounted for needing to have the time in the morning to meditate, for example. That is a non-negotiable item for me. So I always have time slotted in my morning. The first 15 minutes of my day always includes hypnosis or meditation time, so nothing gets scheduled or planned on purpose. So make sure that whatever your non-negotiables are, that you have been able to accommodate them as you're weighting out your plan for that particular sprint period. So once you have your weights onto those items that are going to be included in the next sprint, now you can prioritize them and you can say, this one needs to happen first. And often with certain things, particularly if it's like a larger project like a webinar, there are some things that naturally need to happen first because the other items will build on those. So you have to write the email sequence before you can send out the emails, or you have to write the sales copy before you can begin posting it and promoting the webinar into different places. So make sure you take that into account as you're identifying the order. And when I'm doing this, I like to kind of have my calendar for the month spread out. So I have a little planner that I use that shows me the calendar at a glance, and I can have a look and say, I think these items need to happen in the first 2 or 3 days. So that's what's going to be scheduled into my plan for those first couple of days. And then I may have like a larger goal for that week, like I'd like to have, the next 3 blogs finished by the end of the week, or I'd like to have the email sequence designed by the end of the week. And so that goes into the plan for the whole month. So then you can begin kind of tentatively marking dates on your calendar for when you expect to be able to work on these different things. And the number one thing that I would like to stress anytime I discuss planning, because this is for me a creative who sometimes gets spontaneous ideas, and while it's important for me to have a guide that I can follow so that when I sit down I know where my focus is, it's extremely important to me to also have a feeling of freedom, a feeling of creativity and space. So I always go into this saying, make it a flexible plan and not a rigid plan. So if you write down that you're going to work on this, this, and this, next Monday, and you put that in your calendar as part of your sprint plan, make sure that you're comfortable within yourself to shift that if you need to. There are things that come up. There are unexpected things that happen in our business and in our personal worlds where sometimes the plan has to be adjusted, and sometimes it's not necessarily just because something external has happened that we have to accommodate. Sometimes it's because we get an idea or we're led to do things differently in order to stay in flow. And I will say that making sure that you follow your flow is one of the key differences in how I approach things like planning compared to a lot of other things that are out there, including the traditional methodologies that we're talking about with using sprint planning. So I'm altering this for intuitive, creative entrepreneurs because I think that the tendency to adhere to rigid plans is often what makes it feel overwhelming and is often what has us fall off the track when we hit a stuck point or we have this great plan and it's very strategic, and then we get to a day where we're like, but I really feel like I need to do this. And then you feel like you can't because your plan doesn't say to do that. I think it's really important that you have a flexible plan if you are a creative, intuitive person, as I am. You don't want to feel like you're confined into a teeny tiny box that you yourself created 2 weeks ago when you designed your sprint. So make sure as you're thinking about this that you take that into account, and that is the key difference about what I'm talking about compared to almost every other planning thing that you will find out there that uses sprint methodologies. So you mark your tentative tasks onto your calendar, you line them up for what you think you'll be doing during each of the days during that sprint, so that 2-week period, so you have something going on Monday. It's also perfectly fine to have days that are blank. If you are like me and you like to have at least some amount of time open in your calendar for creativity, for the possibility of working on a side project. I know a lot of entrepreneurs like to leave like Monday open, for example, or Friday open. You don't have to fully block your sprint period every single day. You can decide that your sprint calendar is 2 weeks, but it only includes Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, for example. Now, most importantly, make sure that you do not exceed your weight limit for that 2-week period. So if you've decided 20 pounds and you have 19 pounds and there's room for a little bit extra, but all of the other items that are probably going to happen next month, all of them are bigger than 1 pound, give yourself the space to have that room. That the way that the sprint planning can work is that when you get through your list, if you get all the way through everything that you planned out for that 2-week period and you find that you still have bandwidth or capacity remaining, you can go ahead and scoop up something that's slated for a future time or a future sprint if you feel like you want to. Or you can just simply celebrate that you finished all your work, you did everything you intended to do, and you're finished early, and there's nothing left for you to do until your next sprint begins. So you can go and relax or, have a meditation, have a yoga session, have a massage, have something relaxing, and enjoy the feeling of delight that comes from accomplishing your plan that you set out to do. So I hope you found this little insight on flexible planning that is accommodated to creative intuitives to be helpful and interesting. Once again, I am Christine Collins. If you would like to see more about my work, how I can support you, and how I work with intuitive, creative, heart-centered entrepreneurs in their niched writing, copy, and content, you can check out my work at transformcreate.com. And in the meantime, I hope that you have an absolutely magical and creative rest of your day. Thanks for listening. This is Christine Collins at transformcreate.com.